Okay, hey, we're back. It's May 10th. I'm Anthony. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Future Proof podcast by BYOAI, and I'm joined, of course, with Shane and Francesca again.
Hello.
Say hi, guys.
Hi. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, I think we're all uh, long week, busy week, but excited to sort of discuss something kind of interesting. Microsoft. So as we all know, most people may know this, obviously Microsoft's heavily involved in AI, but for some listeners, they may not know that Microsoft also owns LinkedIn. And which Microsoft just put out a really interesting report, that's titled the 2024 Work Trend Index Annual Report, which in part they do with LinkedIn. So they're able to query a lot of people about how they're using AI at work. And so it's a pretty thorough report. It's not shallow, it's not deep, but it covers a lot of really interesting information that we're quite interested about. In fact, this is why we wanted to start BYOAI and build a community, was to really help all the people that are going to be facing the requirement and the necessity to use AI to probably be a great team member, or if you're an executive, when and how you should use the AI to accelerate your company's business. And so I think the Microsoft and LinkedIn reports are great to dissect. We'll put links to them in our show notes, and we're just going to jump in. We have a bunch of internal questions that we're going to do. Francesca's written a bunch of great questions, and Shane's got some great notes. So I think that's the introduction to this report. I'm probably missing something, so either you guys can help me out. What
Yeah.
did I miss to just sort of intro these reports?
Well, before we get into what you may have missed, I just want to reiterate something that you said that I think is super crucial to this report, which is that this is something people are going to be interested in. And we can talk about this in the context of other reports that exist. There have been a ton of AI reports released in the past year. So it is early May of 2024. So, 4 months and some change in, there have already been a ton of reports reviewing the past, 12 months of AI, and they all focus on different things. Some reports really focus on the development of benchmarks, the way these AI models are being evaluated. Some reports focus on the societal impact or the cultural impact. Some look at policy. And this one specifically focuses on AI at work. And I think this might be the topic that people will be universally interested in, because it is not just for people developing AI. It is not just for technical folks. It's not just for policy folks. It is for anyone who is a professional in the workplace or wants to be a professional in the workplace. This is going to be relevant to you. And we see that in the way the report summarizes the three findings, which is that employees want AI at work. For employees, AI raises the bar and breaks the career ceiling. And the third finding being that there is going to be a rise in what is termed the AI power user. And so that's what I think is important to just state right off the bat, that this is going to be interesting and likely relevant for pretty much everyone in the workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's funny because you're totally right. We've looked at a lot of the other reports that are coming out, and they tend to be really heavy duty policy reports or benchmarking reports, which are really sort of a requirement for sort of machine learning and AI researchers to understand and compare their body of work. But this is like, hey, if you're working at any company or you're using AI right now, this report makes sense for you. This is an everybody report. And this is almost like the reason why we like this report, and we're going to break it down, is all the AI researchers that have been creating AI. This is how it's being consumed in the workplace. And I think that a couple stats that I think Shane had, but I think that just in the report right off, this is the Microsoft report. They're basically saying already AI is being woven into the workplace. I'm quoting in the workplace at an unexpected scale. 75% of knowledge workers use AI at work today, and 46% of the users started using it less than 6 months ago. It's paying off. So that's like crazy remarkable, because I'll put that in contrast to like when the internet came out. The adoption curve on the internet was like literally like 10-year adoption curve. You know what I mean? There was no broadband internet. Everyone had to get a modem. Computers didn't even have modems. We're a completely different sort of adoption curve that I think is really unique to literally this year. Like the it's just easy to get access to this very powerful technology, and it's clear people are using it, and we should kind of get into that. Hey, Shane, did you have anything that we might want to cover at the very top of this,
No,
or
I
you just
think
want to?
that was a great setup by each of you. I mean, the the thoughts that come to me immediately, reflecting on what is in this report are one, most people, when I say people, knowledge workers specifically, which are called out in the report, most of them have now begun to use these tools. As you mentioned, 75% say they're already using it. About half of them just started using it about 6 months ago. But despite the fact that it is a relatively new phenomenon for people, over 90%, or I think 90% exactly, say that it has actually helped them quite a bit in the workplace, whether it's saving time or being more creative or even enjoying their work more. And the irony here for me is that about half the people surveyed, mentioned in this report, say they're very reluctant to tell their employers that they're even using it. Which you can understand on one hand because, we've talked about this earlier, Anthony. You can understand the reluctance. I mean, I think some people are afraid that if they tell their employers that they're saving all this time, their employers may naturally ask the question, well, why are you even here? So I think there's a little bit of fear of losing their job. On the other hand, I could totally see why people would not want to disclose that they're using AI for another reason, which is if I tell you that I'm doing a job that normally takes me 5 hours in 1 hour or 30 minutes, I'm just going to get 5 more hours of work. So you can see why. I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons behind a lot of these different stats that are cited, but I think you guys did a good job just setting up the topic.
Yeah. And before I jump in with sort of the first discussion question that I have for you, Anthony, about this report, I do want to mention that, Shane highlighted how many people are newly adopting AI in the workplace. And, you can imagine that many people are just newly adopting AI in general. I love language. So to me, it's very reminiscent of when the word Google became a verb, like, oh, let me Google that. It's very reminiscent of like ChatGPT becoming really just part of general lexicon, and the usage of ChatGPT not anymore referring to the tool itself, but just as a word to use, like, let me ChatGPT that, or using ChatGPT as the place marker for using Gen AI. But I wanted to mention that my background is in AI. I was doing AI research at least 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago, and so I wanted to highlight that AI is not new to existence, but this rapid adoption, and particularly this rapid adoption in the workplace, that's what's new. That's sort of what's astounding to me, is that somehow all these, really complex and sophisticated technologies that were being researched for decades have now like broken through into popularity, into the pop culture of today. And I think that's really, really important to also note in terms of just the rapid adoption.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because for some of the listeners, Francesca is a trained, computer scientist in machine learning from Stanford University. And 5 years ago, it's like a half a decade ago, even though AI and the sort of pursuit of machine learning started, in the 40s,
Right.
5 years ago is really a long time ago, and sort of no regular consumer was using machine learning. It was actually like a trade craft for like highly trained people to kind of figure stuff out. And now, like, we're looking at this report, we're saying 78% of knowledge workers are using AI at work today. That is a massive number, and that is a testament to like computer science and of the whole stack, meaning that there's enough computers, there's enough GPU, there's enough technology to roll out to someone's browser that they can do that. So it's really from a product, from designing software for my last 20 years, it's really an amazing like accomplishment, right?
Mhm.
But forget that for a second.
Yeah.
Like at a high level, like I think that you had brought up some really important points here that I think that it's sort of at a, like, what does it mean to work with AI? Like, how should people be thinking about their interactions with AI? Like when a listener is listening to this and they're like, oh yeah, I use AI at work. Maybe it's my own account, or maybe I'm using something that the company's given me. Like, can we give listeners that may not be using AI at work what this means? Like what like a possible like use case would be? Does anyone you guys want to throw out an idea here?
You want to take that, Francesca, or you want me to jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
You can jump in. Yeah.
Well, at its most, from its most general perspective, if you just base it purely on this report, it's really the non-technical class of workers, I think, who are, it's really being emphasized here as far as like where's the biggest transformation in work, right? And that's both in terms of function and industry. And the individual personas they really highlight are people like content creators, marketers, from an industry perspective, people who work in industries like retail and real estate. This is where the report is showing both the greatest amount of adoption and also the biggest transformation in terms of how the work is being done. And as you mentioned, this is also a very Microsoft/LinkedIn focused report. So, tools like Teams get a lot of focus in this. One of the metrics they throw out is just how much time people are saving on meetings, transcribing meetings, learning from meetings. How much call time is being recorded. I don't really find that a particularly interesting stat as far as how AI is transforming work. But I think, a lot of the early disruption, a lot of the big impact is coming in things like text generation, image generation, which is why, it's the jobs like, the marketers, it's the jobs like the graphic designers, where the biggest transformation is happening. That's also where a lot of the early, adoption happened. Just from an anecdotal perspective, think about the popularity of tools like Midjourney, ChatGPT. It's things like writing a job description. Like those do take time. If you can have something like Claude or ChatGPT write it, or your email for that matter. To me, this is where all the lowest hanging fruit really is, and where you're starting to see the first glimpses of, this job transformation that the report is really hinting at.
So like a non-power user who so the report is talking about a lot of clearly the report is established, and this is something Francesca brought to our attention, this notion of bring BYO AI, which is a really, I never saw until I saw this report, but I think we all liked, right? But the report does say that 78% of all AI users are bringing their own AI tools to work. It's even more common in small, medium-sized companies. It's 80%. So it's, LinkedIn is obviously it saw a huge bunch of people, right? So it saw people all around the world. This isn't just like a US centric one, but it's definitely Microsoft focused. But you're bringing your own tool to work, and you're doing this work, right? Whether you're having it help you answer emails. For me, a use case that I use on the regular, and it's sort of I become more reliant on it, and I think I've actually become a better like it's made me think about something better is if I'm writing anything for like that's going to go to a customer or an advisor, I'll write it. And then what I'll do is I'll have one of the AIs, whether it's Gemini or Anthropic, because I use all of them. I'll ask it a very simple prompt. I'll just say, hey, can you rewrite this for business communication? That's a very simple form of like AI at work. It's just it's better than spell check. It sort of amplifies my work, and a lot of times I like what it says, but it's my message. It's not like I'm not like handing the wheel. My emails are not being auto answered by AI. You know what I mean? I think that if we get to a place where we're getting more emails, and as a result of AI generating more emails for then the receiver to have AI respond to emails, I think it kind of gets out of control. So I think we need to still be in that loop. I don't know,
Yeah.
we were talking
I,
about that earlier, Francesca. Do you kind of know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah. I mean, to go back to the original question, which is like, what does it mean to work with AI? So I think Shane and Anthony both brought up really great use cases. There is a pretty nice chart or kind of infographic on the index report. If people who are listening do have it open, it's on page 16. And the chart basically shows AI aptitude heating up. I'm taking the words off the report, so quote unquote, heating up across roles and industries. And the roles and industries are bucketed, at least on this first page where the biggest proportion is, bucketed into creative, business, and interestingly, software. And so Shane and Anthony, I believe that Shane, you talked about creative. And so the biggest proportion is content writer. This says that 33% of members on LinkedIn have added some AI aptitude skills to their profiles. And again, this is, very Microsoft heavy, very LinkedIn heavy. The data comes from LinkedIn profiles. But content writers, graphic designers, and marketing managers are the top three biggest proportions of occupations that have added AI aptitude skills to their profiles. Then you have something like, entrepreneur, operations manager, business development manager. So that kind of talks to the side that Anthony was referring to. And interestingly, software is up there. Front-end developer and web developer. And so front-end developer, for those of you who might not know what front-end means, that is sort of what you get right at the end, what you as a consumer or what you as a user interact with. That's the front end. So front-end developer and web developer, those are pretty high up there too. And one can theorize that it could be because of the adoption of Copilot, which we can get into later. We actually did a whole podcast about it last time, if you want to really, really hear sort of the discussions about AI and coding. But I guess to go back to that question of how are humans working with AI, it is broadly, across many different industries. And it really is just about finding which task fits your role. So what the content writer that is upskilled in AI might be using AI for could be different from what the business development manager is using AI for. And for me, the commonality is that everything is still quite human driven. It requires the human, regardless of the industry, regardless of the occupation, to take the initiative and open this tool, subscribe to this tool, and give the tool what it needs to be done. So for me, working with AI at the present moment is still very much human driven, therefore necessitates the human present to take initiative to actually use that tool.
Right.
I think it's also very much a function of just how this new breed of AI works, right? If you think about a large language model, it's essentially a word calculator, right? We're not talking about something like an actual calculator, which is very explicitly designed to do math. This is, these LLMs are very explicitly designed to predict words.
Right.
So it shouldn't be surprising, I think, therefore, to see where the biggest adoption is happening in content writer. People who produce words are, by far and away at the top of that list. I think coding is in a similar category, with things like diffusion models, obviously there's a lot of imagery being, put out there.
Yeah.
But one of the also very interesting things about this report is the reason why a lot of this adoption is happening, right? Just think about how much burnout people are experiencing at work. Yeah, and this is going back for several years now. You think about trends like the Great Resignation, you think about things like quiet quitting.
Mm.
The report references some statistics, which indicate that a lot of people are thinking about quitting their jobs, in the next year. I think people in general are just overloaded and they're stressed about work. And these tools have come along really at just the right amount of time. So you've got both the availability of these new tools, but you've also got this incredible desire to automate away, what is very menial and mundane work for a lot of people. And and for that same reason, it's not surprising to see, again, not just the non-technical people adopting these tools, what seems at the greatest rate, but specifically people who work, at the top of this list in, administrative and support services. There's just a lot of repetitive tasks involved in industries like that. And they are the number one group as far as where, AI aptitude has increased the most, according to this report.
Yeah. And I want to also point out that and this goes back to Anthony's BYO AI point. I want to point out that these tools that are being used across occupations and industries, like, it is likely the same tool. If we're just taking ChatGPT as an example, or Claude, which is Anthropic's LLM, if we're taking that like as the tool that a content writer is maybe using to create copy for a marketing email, that is probably the same tool that, a business development manager who might be wanting to hire an analyst is using to create a job description. And that might also be the same tool that a real estate broker is using to create, the posting for a listing. Like, these are all different industries, different occupations, different tasks, but they're using the same tool. And I think that's another really fascinating dimension to this, because it is a general purpose thing.
Yeah.
And that is not necessarily the framework that had been set in the job market, where it was very much about specializing in a certain skill set and in a certain kind of knowledge base to actually do the job functions well. So maybe the working with AI is that you need to develop that. You need to curate your skill set for the occupation. But in terms of the task itself, these general purpose tools work just fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's, on page 16, the report has a great breakdown of what Francesca was talking about, which is like, the administrative and support services, or the, the content writer. But I think that the point that you were just making was like, all of those people are probably using the same tool set that they've got, right? Which is like Microsoft's Copilot, which is essentially ChatGPT, or it's like Claude. It's like no one's using, like, I think this report's not talking about how there's all these other specialized tools that we're tracking. We're seeing,
which exist,
right?
Which is
it's
important.
Like these are precisely, and this is just a Microsoft report. They're really talking about Copilot in a sense, right? And I think that's a really great point. And it's what I think is really like and maybe you're like putting this point out there for me to like sort of slam dunk or like an alley oop, but it's like if you're using ChatGPT and you're like writing great, I don't know, like, cold emails or warm emails, if you actually just move to the left or the right, you can actually write code with it. You know what I mean? It's like, that's how general purpose the tool is. Like, you might be like, have a proclivity to write emails with ChatGPT, but if you want, you could actually write Python scripts if you just applied yourself. that's unique. Like you couldn't do that with Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. Like
Mhm.
PowerPoint made PowerPoints. Microsoft
Yeah.
Word made Microsoft Word.
Yeah. And things are becoming multimodal now, which
Exactly.
means that you now have different modes of content. And so this was big when Google released their latest version of Gemini, which was that you can feed it a video and ask it a question in text and it can output an image. And so that's also, even more multi-purpose than it is now once you start combining those different types of
Yeah,
content.
and I think that like that's where like AI at work. It's like I think that like maybe this is like they talk about the power user. I sometimes watch how Shane uses AI tools,
Yeah.
and it's always quite impressive. But there, I think there was a time where Shane was like, oh, I'll just upload this image and have it ask like tell me what it is or something like that. I don't know what use case you were using it for, but I was just like that was like a power user play. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like where and I don't know if
I
the
mean,
average person
y-
does that at work.
you could get someone to sort of put in an image from this report and tell you what it gleans from that image and see if you
yeah,
end up with this same
Oh,
report,
I think
which,
that's what Anthony's referring to.
oh, okay, great.
I was trying, I think you're referring to me trying to reverse engineer prompts, like providing in the early days of Midjourney, providing an image and
Ah,
trying to
yeah,
figure out what prompt could have produced this.
right. Yeah.
yeah. But both points are accurate. Like you could I think that's like on the spirit of like AI at work. It's like you could look at a diagram and go like you know explain this to me. I'm an AWS, admin. Explain this diagram to me. And if it's like a, schematic of your infrastructure, it will explain it to you. It's in, and I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people know that. Like, hey, if I'm at work and I have an image, I could upload it to one of these systems, and it will actually
Yeah.
explain it. It's quite impressive.
Yeah. And before we sort of, move the discussion further, maybe to a different point, I just wanted to highlight another page in the report. So if anyone is following along with it, it's page 22. And this page really talks about how power users are using AI. And there are statements that are listed, such as when I don't get a response, I want the first go, I try again. I start my day using AI, I research and try new prompts, talking about sort of this very, I would say, experimental or at least very curious and inquisitive collaboration with AI. And it does seem like across the board, the power users that are highlighted in the charts just f- far and away are the ones most willing to experiment. And so highlighted here is, the line, I regularly experiment with different ways of using AI. I research and try new prompts. Before starting a task, I ask myself, could AI help me with this? So, if you are a listener and you are thinking of sort of adopting AI tools for the first time, or you're, coming to this podcast to think about how you can improve your AI tool usage, it does seem like in this report, one of the key takeaways is that the power user is the user that is willing to explore. And that might mean prompting and then prompting and then prompting again. It might mean, asking yourself, what are the other tools out there that I could be using? Digging in there or looking at the resources like BYOAI that have these other tools listed, doing it regularly. So consistently using it is really the only way to get better. And so Shane, being kind of the model student of this, Shane has taught me so many new AI tools and tricks. And I think that comes probably from a wealth of just usage in the workplace. Yeah, to just answer the very, very first question of how to interact with AI, it does seem like this report is nudging us to be very willing to just explore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's equally about creating more fulfillment and time saving and meaning in your work for yourself personally as it is about really just needing to do this. Like I think people have to do this going forward. One of the key statistics cited in the beginning was that the vast majority of employers, actually, let me find it before I misspeak, but employers, a great deal of them say they won't even consider hiring, non-technical people going forward unless they have AI skills, right? So there is a
Yeah.
recognition now among, a lot of big employers that that AI is it's not just a luxury, it's a requirement going forward. They're all questioning, how do we use these tools to accelerate our work to save time? And that's why I think it's ironic that a lot of people don't want to disclose that they know how to do it. Now, there's somewhat conflicting data, along those lines when you see some of the other statistics that are mentioned in the report, which is that the number of people taking AI classes has absolutely skyrocketed. They say 142x multiple in people adding skills like ChatGPT to their LinkedIn profiles, 160% increase in the number of people taking courses on AI. So there's definitely a huge uptick in terms of interest and people putting it to actual work. But I find that the people who are not in these categories yet, the people who are not just reluctant to use the tools but don't know where to get started, a lot of it has to do with not just a lot of it has to do with not pausing before doing your work, right? And they said one of the biggest indicators of whether people became a power user with these new tools was that they stopped before doing a particular job and reflected on the question of, how can AI help me do this? That's really difficult to do for a lot of people because you have this inertia behind you where it's like, I just need to get the job done. And any pause in that process is, I think, perceived as being unproductive. And therefore they don't pause. They don't think about it. They don't do the research because it just feels unproductive.
Yeah. And I'm inclined to add another question to that reflection, which is equally as important, if not more important, to me, which is that asking yourself, how can AI help you do this task? But also knowing that it is a very real possibility that AI may not help you with this task. These are limited models. These are models that, you can just see how many new releases from all the major players happen in a year, which is a very short cycle for, something to happen. These are models that are constantly improving. The use cases are also, being fine-tuned to fit these models. And so in that reflection, and equally important, is also asking yourself, for example, how might AI not be the most useful choice in this particular task? And you putting maybe more of your efforts into that task and taking away from the task that AI is useful for.
Yeah. That's deep, right? A little bit. It's like, it's so you mentioned that these models are changed in a year, which is like, a lot, right? And so they can offer you a lot more.
Right.
And you're right. More often than not, you're going to kind of ask AI something that it's like, hey, I can't help you there, right? But it's not going to say that. It's going to say something that so. That's where I think on that chart that you were saying on page, I think it was what page was it? I'm looking at it right now. 23, you said, or
22.
Yeah, 22. I feel like for the skeptics, I think you're in hot water. I can't really speak to you, except you need to change your mindset. But on the power user side, I think that when you start moving into the power user, you start realizing, like, I didn't frame that question right. It's like, oh, you don't have an answer for me, or that answer is like really ridiculous. Let me ask you to a different way, right? And you start realizing that at work, you now have this like infinite answer machine, and that answer machine may be wrong, and it's okay. You have to realize, like, oh, okay, you're giving me stuff back. So I don't know if I'm addressing your point, but I think that if you become in some of our notes here, we talked about becoming like over-reliant, or in like that kind of such a thing. I feel like you have to use this tool as like, you're still the boss. Like
Yeah,
you're
totally.
the questioner. Like you need to still get the data back and go like, how do I evaluate this? Does this help me with my job to be done?
Yeah.
And you know, the scarier point is like when you're not trained and you don't have experience in your business and you ask AI to tell you something, it's going to give you an answer. And if you don't understand that answer, like you shouldn't turn that work in. You're going to end up looking like you are not like you're not using AI right, and you can end up in hot water. So I feel like AI could be giving younger people in their careers a lot of false confidence because they just don't understand the data, and getting over reliant on it could cause them a lot of problems.
Yeah. I the use case that I really like to sort of reflect on in addition to that, and I think over reliance is a great way of framing it, because a lot of it is just sort of the assumptions you make when you use a model. And if you do come into the assumption that every answer is the answer that you both want and need, then this over reliance, this sort of autopilot when interacting with the AI develops. And I think about the use case specifically in the workplace of when you have a brainstorming session with your team, or when you maybe present an MVP, like a minimal viable product, to your team, and you need that pushback, right? Like this is one of the core pillars of collaboration, the core pillars of teamwork in the workplace, is that people are going to give you constructive feedback. And I do think that is pretty ingrained in sort of humans in a way. I think humans are sort of, whether it is natural or, you know, going through the process of, you know, maturing into someone in the workforce, like we give each other, the three of us, like critical feedback all the time. And not only do we give each other critical feedback, I feel like at least the two of you are always also asking for critical feedback, which I think is so useful and makes the team experience in the workplace so much more fruitful. And that's something that, like, as a, you know, just to give a practical use case to the listener, if you're wondering, oh, how might I actually be over reliant on AI? If you are doing this sort of brainstorming session with your AI, you want to make sure that you are also prompting it for, you know, constructive feedback, or, you know, criticisms of a certain idea, or where this might fall short in this particular use case, or what the compromises may be, which are, you know, very natural in human conversation. But since you are the boss in your interaction with something like ChatGPT, part of the reflection is also making sure that you account for what it isn't giving you, which might be that lack of sort of constructive feedback.
Yeah, and consider the number one, you know, job in this report, which is content creation, right?
Right.
To over reliance on AI, to me, essentially is having content that just sounds very robotic, and it sounds exactly
Yeah.
like AI wrote it. And if you think about just general trends in media, and we use AI all the time, even for content production, but so much more of our media will become generated over time, you know, not just text, but increasingly image and video. But just focus on text alone for a second. Just think about how many blogs and product descriptions and, you know, other written word is going to be generated by this text. Like I just don't think it's unless you're just there for the information, I just don't think it's a very good experience for the user when it just sounds like everything is so generic and literally it just sounds like it came from a robot. Like we don't want that. And so I think you know, not being over reliant just means making sure you've got that human touch. Like you need the human in the loop to, if you're going to use it to write content, make sure it at least sounds human. And that requires a human to do.
Yeah. And I think that, like, you know, the over reliance, you know, I just push back, like, so like we're having this conversation about like, hey, what it's AI's in the workplace like, and LinkedIn's giving us some really good stuff here. And sort of going off the LinkedIn script, it's like, we're all like, I just postulate that we're already over reliant on technology, right? Like, given like a job to be done where I needed to do some like algebraic equations to solve something in real time to like do something, I'd be just toast, right? Like it'd be really hard for me to get that job done, without Excel, without formulas, without compute. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
the AI technology that's being pushed to us right now is further pushing us into this over reliance on compute. But kind of what Shane was just saying is like, it's going to be so powerful that like the requirement to use it is going to be there, and yeah, we're going to become over reliant. Like we are
Yeah.
going, like it's like my spell checking and grammar checking with AI is great, and the internet is already forced this homogenation on
Mm-hmm.
like you described your product this way, so did I. Like the AI is not doing that for us. Like any marketing manager looks at their competitors, or they look at like their aspirational brands, and they try to adopt their language and storytelling into their own world.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already become like, well, Steve Jobs said to do that, or Elon Musk does that, and therefore you just copy. And I feel like the over reliance may squelch like literally a new idea, right? That's the scary part. Like we just do not have new ideas. We're just copycats. And at some point the AI is going to be like, hey, I need new data. Like I need
Right.
new ideas to consume to make my model better. I'll
Yeah.
stop my riff and just see
No,
what you guys.
I think, I mean, this is just really, really juicy and just really fun to
Yeah.
kind of just talk about candidly, and sort of, this thought experiment of where the over reliance might come in, what the effects of that will be. I think my personal take on over reliance, and I'm glad that you brought up things like this over reliance on, a word processor, or over reliance on spell check or a calculator. Like that is true. But with AI, similar to those things, you can have so many interactions with the AI that go right. But what's important is that you know when to intervene.
Right.
And this happens with spell check all the time. Sort of, spell check, I am also very reliant on spell check on my phone, but there are certain words that I like to, maybe I have an inside joke with, a friend, or maybe there is like a word that I want to cite in another language and my spell check is in English. There still needs to be that human intervention for that one instance in maybe the hundreds of thousands of words that are going, into your phone text box and then being run through spell check. And as this pattern or this workflow develops where you're interacting with some kind of LLM and you're just prompting and prompting and prompting, you just need to know after, okay, maybe 12 prompts, okay, pause. This isn't right. And then the next 12 prompts might be okay again, but it's just that one critical point of intervention that could make or break whatever project or task you're working on.
Yeah, this is what we've talked about this several times before. It's like, well, what are the skills that will really be useful, given the rise of these new tools, and exactly what you just said. For me, that means like it's really like about taste, like having good taste, being able to curate, and in general,
Yeah.
but like also in terms of the responses you're getting back, like you need to know like which of those is the best option, which of those looks the best. Like style still, in my opinion, can't be relegated to the AI.
Right.
Like that's got to
Yeah.
come from the human.
And that's
And
kind of baked into the UI, right? Of some of these
yeah,
things, like Adobe Firefly will spit out 4 images, and you still have to kind of pick per your style. And there's no guarantee you will pick the same image as your cubicle neighbor or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And so it's also making me think of one of the other things mentioned in the report, which is that a lot of employers said that they would hire a young person with less experience if they had expertise in AI over a person that was more tenured and had more experience who had less experience in AI. But and they also referenced the fact that it's not just the young people using AI. Pretty much
Mhm.
every generation are using it, but you do definitely see a trend where the people using it the most are the Gen Zers, the young folks, and that declines with age. But I would say, a point in favor for the older folks is that that's where the wisdom really is. That's where the people who I think have maybe a little bit better judgment because of their experience. So I think they stand to gain quite a bit, from
Yeah.
becoming power users also, because again, it's really about like using that judgment to decide what makes for a good, output,
Yeah.
right? What makes for a good image. So there may be more reluctance to use it with that community, but I think
It's
that judgment is very much needed.
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we talked about that. I could since I'm older than both of you guys, I actually think that it. And I was just out to lunch with some colleagues yesterday, and this very topic came up, like that as you're older in your career, you might be facing some burnout, or you just like have more stuff to get done in a day than someone who's a lot younger in their career. Um, but the context, like, I mean, again, context is what drives like success, right? If you know what's going to happen next, because you've been here, done that, you're going to probably excel a lot better than if like you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know what
Yeah.
game you're playing. You're going to get punched in the face probably a lot faster. So, if you just take the sort of software developer for a second, and you're like, hey, you need to make this MVP, you know, like you take a younger person versus an older person. The younger person might beat you in sort of dexterity and like, you know, frankly, and also just dumb luck actually is great. Like you got no sort of, the context is the naivety actually gives you the sort of creative freedom to make mistakes. Whereas the older
Mhm.
person might have like, that's just dumb. No one's going to want that. And you're like, really? No one's going to want to buy a house online? I think you're wrong. And boom, you have this other, you know what I mean? Because it's like, if for an older person, you're just like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it's like, so the AI actually doesn't really sort of change that sort of like naivety or creative insight. You either have it or you don't. But it could
Yeah.
actually give you this skill where it's like, since you have insight and context, you can actually tell the AI how to code something faster. Whereas someone that doesn't have any context, the actual mistake loops are a lot longer. So it's like kind of a weird sort of thing. You are getting get like a better result asking a prompt better questions as a result of having more sort of consumed time at the wheel and get better answers than someone has no idea how to answer, this magical genie that we call AI right now. So
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
I before I go into the last question to like,
yeah, please.
kind of shift topic, I just think it's so funny the way that you kind of framed what the sort of years of experience and the wisdom gained from years of experience is, that having that context allows you to more accurately predict what's coming next, because that's exactly how an LLM is trained,
Right.
right? Like
Mhm.
the LLM is given all this context, which just manifests in just an insane amount of data so that it can precisely predict what comes next. And just, to your point, Anthony, about that's the same with people, right? You develop this context and you are able to predict what's next. And like an LLM, more data tends to lead to better performance. And
Well,
so
yeah,
I thought it was
yeah.
just really funny that that is exactly
It,
how you framed it,
I
which
mean,
is
but yeah, but
also how the AI works.
yeah, totally. And before we jump there, I think it's a really interesting thing. We're a little off topic, but like for listeners that are trying to understand like AI and why it's useful, it's like there's a scaling principle here that literally says as these AIs just get more and more data and you give it more and more compute, it actually becomes better at predicting. And as you relate to humans, which I was just saying is like as you kind of get like more domain expertise, you actually are going to get better at what you do, whether that's basketball, boxing, coding, marketing. You actually are going to get that. I think the over reliance on expertise means that you might miss some novel idea. And that's where
Mhm.
the startup or the entrepreneur and the youth come in, is like they have no idea what they're up against. And they'll just throw out a crazy idea like, I'm going to rent mattresses in my room and charge for it. That's Airbnb. There, people were just like, that's the dumbest idea. But the context they had was like, no, that's actually really interesting to our group of people. So the again, relying heavily on AI will just actually you'll cul-de-sac into something that's not necessarily novel anymore. Like it's coming up with novel ideas. I think there's a potential, absolutely, to connect dots, but the prompters are going to have to do that. So, you know, my before we leave this one topic, page 22 of this report, like, what do we have to say about the skeptics?
I was just about to bring that up. I think we still confront skeptics all the time, and that there are a variety of reasons why I think people are skeptical. You've got people in the creative industry, for example, who've got their own, I think, very justified reasons to be skeptical. There's a certain pride and ownership that comes with being an artist. We don't want to turn all of our best creations over to a machine, right? So I understand that. But, my answer to a lot of them is to view this new breed of technology essentially the same way you would view a computer, right? I don't know anybody, maybe except for my father, who does not use a computer. It is just such a great accelerant to be able to do anything. You can write a script on it. You can do any number of things. And if you look at the data from this report, the benefits of using AI tools are, I think, things that everybody should want, right? So, they say, power users, these are the folks who claimed that they save more than 30 hours in a day because of using AI.
30
I
minutes.
think that actually significantly understates the potential of using AI. I sometimes feel like, I'm able to do 2 or 3 days in a matter of hours, but they say the power users say, it makes an overwhelming percent of them, 92%, say that it makes their workload more manageable. It boosts their creativity. It helps them feel more motivated and enjoy their work a lot more, right? Like, I think these are things we all want.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anthony, go ahead if you.
No, I was giving the perfunctory. Yeah, like I think this. I mean, like, actually, I don't know. Maybe I'm just very judgmental. I actually think skeptics are sort of like are just generally incurious.
That's not true though, and this is the point that I wanted to bring up, because I actually think calling them skeptics on the report is a complete misnomer if you look at the chart, because there are some bars in the chart that the skeptics are well past 50% of each group who agrees, and those bars are the ones that demonstrate curiosity. Like, they are the highest bars for skeptics are, they are close to 75% on when I don't get the response I want from the first prompt, I try again. Over 50% on I research and try new prompts. Over 50% on it helps me be more productive. Over 50% about I don't want to go back to working without AI. So I think the term skeptics is actually not the right word for the things that they are in majority actually voting on. It's just that the things that they are, kind of lagging compared to the other groups are just that they don't start their day using AI, that, they don't use AI to get ready for the following workday. They don't wish AI could do even more on my behalf. So I feel like skeptics isn't the right word, because there is an openness to utilizing AI, but maybe not so much in terms of completely undoing their pattern of behavior or their workflow the way power users have kind of overhauled everything.
You have to also be careful not to just, think that all skeptics are the same. I mean, there's a distribution of personalities in that skeptic class, and some people, I think, legitimately are just totally incurious. They, their understanding is very surface level. But there are, I think, a number of skeptics who are not only not incurious, but they are very deeply familiar with these AI tools, and they just don't like what it represents.
Yeah. I don't like the term skeptics for what the data shows.
So you're totally right. Like, you reframed my position. My incuriousness was more to the skeptics that Shane was referring to, but I actually agree. I think this is you're right. They had to frame it some way, and the way that you addressed it in right now, I agree, and it's probably not a flattering term because they're actually clearly on page 22. They are curious. They're just not as they're just probably don't have as much time as the power users. Where do you want to go next, Francesca? Because you had some good ideas here.
I wanted to end by, as we frequently do on these episodes, by looking towards the future. And I want to sort of go back to this concept of BYOAI.
Yeah.
So people are bringing their own AI tools, their own sort of AI workflows to the workplace. I am inclined to believe this is largely on an individual basis, as the term BYOAI suggests. And I wanted to theorize sort of what that might actually look like in the future. And we've talked about this in other podcasts, and we've talked about this with other people on the team and in our meetings and our prep meetings, etc. But, right now it does feel very much kind of piecemeal, bring the AI that you have at home to the workplace, to your task, to your own individual workflow. And I just cannot imagine that the big players developing these large AI tools, as they become more sophisticated, as they become more multi-purpose, multimodal, I can't imagine these tools not being baked into existing workflows or baked into existing platforms more. And I just wanted to sort of, gauge both of your thoughts on what is the future of BYOAI? Because it feels like BYOAI is very much the state of AI in the workplace now, but it might not be the state of AI in the workplace in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say this report feels as if they're looking directly down at their toes and maybe slightly behind, right? Because they're doing a report in arrears, you know what I mean? They're, they surveyed a bunch of people. They probably surveyed them months ago, and it's taken, this long to get the report. I actually think this reminds me back in the old web days when I got started a long time ago. Everyone just brought their own library to work. You hired an engineer and you'd be like, great, you're full stack. What do you got? And every engineer that you hired onto the team and, designer, et cetera, all kind of brought their own process, which is kind of like bring your own framework, right?
Yeah.
And then, as things just became more mature, when you kind of started seeing how the Googles and the other teams started building, they really systematized massive scaled operating system, like compute systems. So, those days are kind of gone at a lot of startups. I mean, if you join a startup now, they'll adopt some framework, right? We're doing React, or we're doing this, we're doing that, we're using this model view control framework. So those days are gone largely, where it was what they used to call it cowboy engineering, right? It was fun, by the way, but now you're joining really big systems. This in business world right now is very much like, hey, there is no framework here, that you have to develop your own. My bet is the systemization of AI in your business is underfoot right now, and maybe in 2 to 3 years when you join a company, you're not going to bring your own AI. Not at all. That's not happening. You're going to be I actually think the way you just get completely the way I believe the company is going to work is you're going to get onboarded, you're going to get recruited, hired, and onboarded into a company's culture almost through AI. And your prompt to your company is going to be very much how you operate with the company. It's just going to happen. The AIs are going to actually force interaction between cross departments as a result of its knowledge of how everyone's working. I actually think it's going to become very systematized. There's going to be a lot of, you could actually use the AI at your company in a very jazzy way, but you're going to be in a system in which it's going to be achieving the yield optimization the company wants. And I think that's being programmed now. That's going to happen. I don't know if that's answering your question at all, Francesca.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I hadn't, I'll let Shane answer before I jump in and sort of distill both of your answers, but I really like that idea of, a systematized AI will work cross-functionally and across the teams, like that whatever your engineering team is doing is going to be directly related to how the marketing team is, and interacting with your systematized AI. I really like that.
I mean, you could see like if the companies. I'm not a huge fan of these. I understand the reason why you do them as an executive at companies in my past, like OKRs. But it's like you could really start seeing that if you are a really forward-thinking company, it's like the prompts that you're putting in, engineers, product managers, customer success teams, that the AI that's listening to those all could start kind of creating a feedback loop that says, hey, I noticed that customer success and engineering, you guys were like asking very similar questions. You need to actually have a meeting to discuss this. Like,
Nice.
It's like using
That's
machine
cool.
learning to like connect dots is a great use of compute power, right?
Yeah, I really like that. Shane, did you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on?
I think it's useful to understand the reasons why we even have this BYO AI phenomenon to begin with, and that is because people who are doing the work at the lowest levels and really throughout the organization are not getting a lot of guidance and leadership from their organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understandable that people are coming with their own solutions, especially when you've got as a backdrop so many people who are just totally burnt out and unsatisfied with their work. Like they're really struggling to find solutions to their problems. And the problem in large part is just repetitive menial work, right? Like I just think none of us want to do that. At the same time, I agree, with what you're saying, Anthony, where we do want to systematize some of this, right? Like the other day we were talking about what is our stack for sales and outreach, right? It's like, and we had a call with the team where it's like, we're going to use very specifically these AI tools, these 3 AI tools to manage that entire workflow. And we want everyone to use that process because now we're all part of the same system. We all have visibility into what we're all doing. And therefore, it's a much more top-down process, right? That does create a lot of efficiency because people are not bringing their own solution, right? All that said, I feel like we should never want, this phenomenon to go away, right? Like, because you want the people on your team you want to give them at least a little bit of freedom to come up with their own solutions and to experiment constantly with these new tools. That's one of the things about this industry is it's changing so fast.
Yeah, you have to.
That new tools are constantly coming out or existing tools are just changing. Some of them are just going to go away. And I think that calls for constant experimentation. And so one of the things we also do on our team is like, again, it was like reading out of this research report. We tell people, think about how you can use AI to do everything, literally everything. And that may result in them coming back to you with a solution that's not in your pre-approved stack already. So I think you got to give people you have to give people the latitude to continue to experiment, because that's where I think the iterative improvement's going to happen and may cause you to change, that top-down guidance, that you're implementing across the entire team. I think the last thing I'll say is like, one of the first stats mentioned in this report is that people are reluctant to talk about their use of AI at work, which I think is really unfortunate. So for me, you really have to build a culture of not just experimentation, but like open celebration of how you're using these tools. Anthony, when you and I talk, we constantly are showing each other, look at this really cool thing that I did with AI. I just like condensed this 5-hour workflow into 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean,
people should be sharing those experiences with each other on the team and celebrating it without, a fear of some sort of retribution or that they're going to put themselves out of a job. They should be rewarded for that stuff.
I think that's like, like luckily, like, Francesca is a part of this. Like we're building a community that where we have green field, and so that we can just kind of do that. Like I think it's like a lot harder when you have a $50 million run rate, 220 person company where everyone's just like, talk about the burnout. They're just trying to help get from $50 million to $60 million in this quarter. And there's no sort of time where you can sort of like sell, like just pull off the side of the road. And this is what organizations are faced with. And this report's not getting into it. Maybe Francesca's prompt here to ask us this question is like, it's like, how does a company actually get out ahead of itself? Because BYO AI is like helping employees just kind of manage their days to get ahead. But really, where is it like, how do you make an AI driven organization, your whole team get there? It's going to meaning re-platforming everything. And not a lot of companies have it. Look at Google's struggle right now. Like Microsoft has actually done it really quite well, in my opinion, but it's like, it's a really hard thing. So I actually feel like you're going to need to you're going to have to hire a whole team to meditate on all the processes that you're doing to reinvent yourself to become like an AI advantaged organization, which means your employees are AI advantaged, which means they had the time to experiment with their own, bring your own AI, but they need a cohesive methodology to how to do this. And that is going to become, before AGI gets here, you're just going to have like, how does your business become AI way before AGI?
It's like software development, it's all iterative. Like tell people, we want you to bring your own.
Well, I would say that, so the point I wanted to make and was, there are 2 points I wanted to make. The first of which is actually very relevant to sort of the discussion you two were just having now, which is that I think whether it's explicit or implicit, if you look at a lot of the, and I'm going to talk about like some of the tools that aren't, I mean, this is relevant for ChatGPT as well, but if you look at just AI tools, across the board, not just the major players, it does seem that whether it's explicit or implicit, that they realize the biggest gains are going to be made with sort of the enterprise level, not necessarily the individual adopter level.
Yeah.
And basically, if you go on almost every AI tools price plan page on the website, you will almost certainly see like 3 columns that have sort of like the free core functionality, the like $10 a month for the individual power user, and then you have some sort of like enterprise plan that's going to scale depending on how many seats you want to give this sort of AI tool to in your company. So it's already being like baked into the business plan of these AI tool developers that the biggest opportunity to scale is going to be when companies, leadership in companies, as you said, Jane, like leadership, the people who are going to be the change makers and decision makers of the companies, decide that they want to invest in this like enterprise level software, this enterprise level AI tool. And I think that's going to be just the next level on both the side of the people using it, the consumer, the CEO who decides this is a good idea for all of their employees, and then also from the AI developer side, I'm creating a tool like for the workforce. It's gonna be like, can my tool scale so that if a company wants to adopt it across the board, this tool is going to be efficient and useful to them. The second point I wanted to make is on page 24 of the index report, which is titled Copilot Study. So Copilot being the AI of Microsoft, it says, Copilot Study, How AI Could Reshape the Workday. And it's trying to do what sort of Anthony was talking about in terms of, Microsoft doing it well, Google also trying to do it with their AI, Gemini. And, these are 2 huge players in the world, not just the tech world, just in the world, in terms of a suite of tools that are used by the professional workforce. And so in this study, it talks about, if you are a person using emails, Copilot users will, read 11% fewer emails and spend 4% less time interacting with them than non-Copilot users. And then you go into your meetings and Copilot is going to help you brainstorm. It's going to help you draft an agenda, and then you go down into documents, and then Copilot is going to help you use these ideas that from your meeting into like a nice Word document or a nice PowerPoint. And so it seems like this is just the next step in terms of what on a like macro company level people are going to have to think about if you are Microsoft, how you get everyone to adopt Copilot in every part of their workflow. And then if you're a CEO, like trying to make an enterprise level decision to actually like buy seats for some AI tool out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I looked at that study and it felt very sort of like high level, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally.
And I think like, yes, it's decent and it's a decent shot. Like, I mean, I think it's a contribution. I think folks that are listeners, you should download the report. It's on page 24. And I think that, like, let's just be honest, like when you're working at a company, whether you're new or old, you're just inundated with lots of things to get done. And sometimes it's hard to prioritize, or you just get lost in the deluge of stuff. And so if you can actually have an AI help you ferret out what's important, what's not, that's really good, because computers are good at like looking at data and stack ranking it, right? And I think
Right.
that like overall, if you can kind of get a compute system that's like, these are the most important emails. Like Google, I look at my important emails. Like I don't look at my non-important emails. You know what I mean? I just don't. I've gotten rid of that in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think if you can start instilling, and there's a lot of businesses that run on frameworks, like we run on this framework, like we do this, we do that. Like, it's like we do lean startup kind of stuff. We do agile, we do scaled agile, we do Kanban. It's like all these frameworks to keep people framed in to kind of move stuff through. I feel like AI, like in the behind the scenes, helping people get stuff done, not to be like a task nagger, but let's be honest. Like if I could just be like, oh, you need to kind of I'm going to ask you a few questions to get your OKR report done. I'm going to ask you a few questions to do an employee review. I've read your emails. I've saw all your interactions with Francesca. I'm going to ask you these few questions. Your performance review is going to be done for Francesca. That's going to be a value add to me and you. You're going to get your report. It's going to be personalized. It's going to be great. As opposed to me having to go, I got 27 reports I have to write. I have to then go through all my emails. That's all going to be done by an AI for you, but you're still going to be in it. But that kind of framework, that transformation for an organization, I think is going to actually be helpful, not hurt. And it's going to give all your team members. That's the stuff that I think Shane's talking about, like the mundane work, like finding all the emails and all the coverage that I've done on all my team to write reports. That's a lot of busy work. If it can be all done for me, I want to write the review for Francesca. I just want to have all the data pulled up nice and tidy for me to do the great report. If you get organizations in that direction across the board, you're going to have a way more powerful organization. And, the future of work is going to be frameworks that companies build around their culture and their value system, using their data that allows the prompt that you're prompting your employees, and letting compute systems evaluate the outcomes and adjust in the background for high performance teams. That's the future of work. That's the future of AI at work, but we're not even there yet. We're just like, bring your own tool and like try to like ask a few questions and like get a better email done.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say before we sort of wrap up is, I mean, how many times has it happened where you kind of ask maybe your friend what they use in the workplace for this, or, you start a new job. And when you start a new job, when you're onboarded, the company has already kind of determined what platform you're going to use for emails, what platform you're going to use for, keeping track of note-taking documents, maybe your, like CRM. Like, how many times does it happen where you get asked, like, why are you using, Teams, or why are you using Gmail? And your answer really is, because that's what we use at work. Like, this was the thing I was given. It's kind of like when you're given your work computer, like, why are we using some like HP notebook? Why are we using Mac? It's because it's what I was given. And I think that is going to translate in the future to the AI tool. When someone sort of asks, okay, why are we using Copilot? Why are we using Claude? It'll be like, because this is the subscription my company has.
Yeah.
To some
Right?
extent,
Like that's
you can't avoid that because the company, I mean, the enterprise plan just implies a lot of savings. It's like, well, we're not
yeah.
going to have like 500 different solutions for our employees. We're going to have one solution. It's just easier. That
Yeah.
comes
Like,
with
get
that
on.
comes with the cost.
Of
I guess my
course.
point is, I'm always a fan of like, there's like a term in Buddhism, the middle way, right? Like, you don't want to be on like avoid the extremes, right? So I think
Right.
like on some level, you want the top-down guidance where organizations who have this very holistic view of all their people can say, look, like we are all truly going to row the fastest in the same direction if we are using this same stack. But that does not mean you shouldn't constantly be listening to the people who are doing the actual work, because they're the ones who are going to, in a lot of cases, find the better solutions. And that may cause you to change that stack that you're using across the entire team. And that just happened for years. I mean, you think about just adoption of technology in general, organizations start to adopt, the Dropboxes of the world and the Slacks of the world because they see
Yeah.
their employees, their team, just organically thought these tools were better, regardless of whether they were approved by the organization. So I don't think that's going to stop. And I think organizations should encourage their employees to experiment in, ways that are safe, of course. I think data privacy is definitely a real issue. Cybersecurity is definitely a real issue. You should encourage people, especially now where the landscape is changing so fast, to experiment and to bring those learnings to work and celebrate it, like we said. Like show us what you're using. Maybe that's going to be the rest of the team's process.
I mean, and that's going to come with leadership, so I feel like executive leadership, I mean, some of them are great and some of them are just like, they're just not there. And so right now employees are just making their stuff up. But I feel like the takeaways here that I think we can like sort of say is like, for our listeners and what we're totally interested in is like, AI's here. It's going to transform you, whether you're worried about it or not, you're going to live in a world with it. So like for the business leaders, I think you need to really just think about like digital transformations almost barely done in most organizations, but you're about to go through AI transformation. So you're going to have to start identifying your business problems and then really encourage your team or a select group of team to apply AI to it and really evaluate the outcomes for it. Like really get the team to kind of tell you, like, here's how we did it, like, and force them to do it like every day, all day long. Please do that. If you need help, we can help you. Take a top down and a bottom up approach. Like from leadership, let's get leadership to do it. And from the bottom up, bring your own AI tool, make your job better, and then eventually try to tell your company how to do it. And then honestly, like prioritize training. Training is key. But part of training is just buy your employees access to these tools and let them use it. So like we're like, I'm going to wrap this thing up
Cool.
for us, Francesca. Like, we're BYOAI. We're a community of people that are like learning this stuff and telling people how to learn. Learning actually happens in a community. Like if you just take a course at Coursera, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. So we're really trying to build a community of people that are going to want to talk about this all the time. We think talking it out, learning from others, presenting case studies, having a space where you can actually do that online and in person. That's what we're doing. We're BYOAI really stands for coexisting with AI. So we're happy this report is here. We're happy that you guys are listening. We're going to put stuff in the show notes. Francesca, you got any parting words? And then I'll toss it over to Shane.
No, I think this was a very, we said before when we were prepping that this would be a very juicy discussion, and I feel like it was, and that it will be an ongoing discussion as more things develop in the space.
Shane?
I just have two thoughts. Again, one of the things that is mentioned over and over again in this report is that, this whole BYO AI phenomenon has arisen because, organizations are not providing the leadership to their employees that I think they're capable of. If you're one of those leaders, if you're one of the people who are struggling with figuring out how to use AI in your day-to-day job, let us know. Reach out to us. we would love to help you. We'd love to hear about your workflow. We'd love to hear about, why you're skeptical, maybe, or where we can help you, accelerate, any given task or job with the use of some of these new tools. The second thing I'd say is, this report, again, very clearly states that people want to use AI. The workers want to use AI. So again, that means talking about it internally, celebrating it, but it also means communicating it to future employees. Talk about it in your job descriptions, your job roles, because I think it will result in, a much better outcome for you as a business owner.
Yeah, and my last thing might be like, don't wait too long, because the people that become AI advantaged faster than you are will probably beat you in the marketplace that you're competing in, and that's not going to be a good thing for you and your employees. So, don't kick back and relax right now. This is time to dig deep and get going. So we will catch you next week. Thanks
Great.
for your guys' time.
Yeah.
Let's get back to our normal day jobs.
Have a great weekend.
Y'all. Yeah, good. See you, Francesca. See you, Shane.
See ya.
See you guys.
Bye.